We moved to the farm in 1930. It was called Unity Farm at the time. And my father saw the recession coming, and he moved this family, our family, to the farm. And our property joined the Unity Farm property. And I was 5 years old at that time. So you can figure out my age, I'm 90. Tell you right off hand so you don't try to figure it out. And we had a young couple that came to our house and said that they were starting a Sunday school at the Unity Farm. And would they bring our children, their children, which of course I was one. I had two older brothers, and then there was myself. So I was in the original Sunday school at Unity Farm, which is now called Unity Village. And Harriet and Charles, and I'm going to, now when I speak about Papa Charlie, that's Charles Fillmore, the co-founder. Because there was Charles Rickard, and then there was Charlie, our grandson. And we always called Charles Fillmore Papa Charlie. And so through the year, and so he had 3 sons, he and Myrtle. But first let me tell you, he was my dad's Sunday school teacher. In 1930, we started going to the farm Sunday school. And there was only the Silent Unity building and the tower, which Vi is quite familiar with. And so my dad wasn't much to want to go to church because he'd gone to church and they always were asking for money. So he was very hesitant, but they did take us. And Charles Fillmore was his Sunday school teacher, and Myrtle was my mother's Sunday school teacher. And at the time, there was the Silent Unity building, and then on each side was the Sunday school rooms. And Myrtle was alive at that time, but she passed away in 1931. And so I grew up with the teachings of Unity. And it was called the Unity School of Practical Christianity at that time. And I think they've left out the practical, which to me has been a real problem because it is a practical religion. So anyway, I went through their Sunday school, and Charles Rickard was one of the sons of Papa Charlie, and his wife was my Sunday school teacher. And I can remember Harriet very, very well. And they had 2 children, which was Charles and Rosemary, and I grew up with those kids. And we moved off of the farm. Well, let me tell you, the property that was next to the Unity Farm property was an apple orchard, and they had a fruit stand out in front of the entranceway on Highway 50. And so anyway, as we went to move, and then when I was 12, we moved to Lee Summit, which was 3 or 4 miles away. And I still remained going to the Sunday school. But my mother and father allowed us to go to the Baptist church as a youth group, Presbyterian church and the Methodist church. But I always returned to Unity. Always returned. And it was called a cult at that time. See, when I went there, at the age of 5, it was only 33 years old. The movement was only 33. And it had, Charles Fillmore was in real estate, and he bought the farm property in 1919. By 1927, the tower was finished. Now, all of you, how many of you are familiar with the Unity Tower? Okay. And Frank B. Whitney broadcast from there. And May Rowland was married to Frank B. Whitney until he passed away. And then she married a man by the name of Rowland. Anyway, even though I would go to other youth groups, I would always return back to Unity because to me that was the practical part of the teaching. And then I'm going to skip a few years, and then I went to work at Unity School. And every Wednesday, we had an assembly. Actually, we worked 4.5 days a week at that time. I don't know what they're doing now. But at that time, we worked 4.5 days a week, and every Wednesday, we had an assembly. Oh, first let me tell you, I'm going to give you a couple of hints. Charles Fillmore bought the property at 917 Tracy, and that was the headquarters. And there was the headquarters, and then there was the church, and then there was the inn, Unity Inn. And Papa Charlie, we don't hear enough about him, the co-founder. He had a marvelous sense of humor, a marvelous sense of humor. And on Wednesdays, when we would go to assembly, normally he would be there, but not always, but he would give a talk. And if he didn't have anything to say, he'd say, okay, this is jokes day. And he allowed people to stand up and tell jokes. And James Dillett Freeman was absolutely the best. Now, all of you are familiar with the name James Dillett. He wrote I Am, which went to the moon. And so I worked there. I went to work there in 1942. Left there to come to California in 1954. And anyway, to go back to the Wednesdays, Papa Charlie, well, we had a little group of 4 girls, and we'd put on skits once in a while. And Papa Charlie would always want to know if he was going to be there at that time, because he always liked the skits. He really was and when I was a child, and we would always have a Halloween party, he would always be one of the judges for one of the costumes. He loved parties. He loved people. And he was always very loving toward people. But there was one thing that he did teach, and that was order. He almost put order before love, because he said we love an orderly child. We don't like unorderly children. So he had almost with the love, he had order in his life. And that has always remained with me. Now I'm going to jump forward to when I went to work there. I went to work in Silent Unity. I worked for May Rowland, Catherine Friedman, who had been the wife of James Freeman. Anyway, and you always started in the file room, because you had to pull a person's card to go with their letter to be answered. And it was like a candy factory. You read every letter. You wanted to read every letter that came along. And you didn't get much filing, you didn't get much pulling of the files done when you read the letters. But I want to tell you about one letter that I read that's always remained with me. Now that's in 1942, so you know how many years that's been. This young man, one of the letters was this young man had been on a bus, this was in London, and he spotted a woman that he thought he could snatch her purse. And so he waited till she got off the bus, and he was going to follow her. And as he did so, he looked down and saw the prayer of faith. And if I can tell you this without crying. I'm sorry, what?
He saw what?
He saw, let God, God is my help in every need. That's the first sentence of the prayer of faith. How many of you are familiar with the prayer of faith? Okay. I have learned recently that Myrtle Fillmore, they have her at noon now, giving the prayer of faith. And since that letter, that prayer of faith has been my Bible. God is my help in every need. God does my every hunger feed. God walks beside me, guides my way through every moment, night and day. I now am wise, I now am true, patient, kind, and loving too. All things I am, can do, and be through Christ the truth that is in me. God is my health, I can't be sick. God is my strength, unfailing quick. God is my all, I know no fear, since God and love and truth are here. That letter, he impressed me to such an extent that has been my byword. But you get a lot of letters, but that one has really affected my life. Anyway, I worked at the school. I worked in Silent Unity. And one of the most terrifying things that ever happened to me was that what day did they have that now? I think it was on Wednesday morning. We always had a prayer service. And one day May came in and told me that I was to do the prayer service. And it had to last a half an hour. God, I was 20 years old. Can you imagine a 20-year-old kid doing a prayer service? But I got through it.
Of course you did.
And I was asked to do many more. But I learned from those experiences. And that has been my savior. And then we had to take, when I was in Silent Unity, we had to take classes. And I had to take a class from Catherine Freeman. And she taught me a marvelous, marvelous lesson. I don't think that there was ever a time when I wasn't taught a lesson along the way. And we had a dear friend that had passed away from cancer. And I was questioning it. And I kept questioning it. And she was teaching the 12 powers of man. Catherine was. And I said to her, and I would question her about a person dying of cancer because it was so prevalent, and this had been a very, very dear friend. And one day she said to me, Inez, don't ever ask me again about cancer. She died a couple of years later of cancer. She knew what she was talking about. So she said the power of the word is so powerful. The spoken word is so powerful. When we say, my feet are killing me, what are we saying? We're prophesizing. Those were the lessons I learned. We learned tithing. There was such a tremendous amount of tithing. But anyway, so as I remembered what Catherine said, that has always stayed with me. Has always stayed with me. So you couldn't be there without learning something, without gaining some knowledge, without the practice. So then I left Silent Unity, and I became friends with a couple of the people in the publishing department, and they do the Daily Word, and at the time Weekly Unity, and at the time Progress, and We Wisdom, which they don't have any longer. And I went to the publishing department, and I was a letter writer, and I and another friend had a kind of a competition going on who could write the most letters in a day. And we were still going to assembly, remember. And then I went into Silent 70. And how many of you know what Silent 70 is? By? Okay. Nina Wright was the head of Silent 70, and I became a very dear friend of hers. And the Silent 70 is the missionary department of Unity School. And we sent, Hallmark would send out pallets of greeting cards, Mother's Day cards, Christmas cards, all sorts of birthday cards. And on Sundays, we would sort the cards and put them in their proper envelopes. But anyway, Silent 70, we sent to orphanages, we sent to prisons, we sent to any church that requested material. And then Nina spoke at the prisons in Kansas, Lansing, in the women's prison, and I would drive her there. What an experience to go into a prison and have your boss being the speaker, and you'd see all of these people coming in, all these men that would be coming in to hear her. And they said that those were always the biggest crowds because she was teaching a positive life. And how many of you know where that Silent 70 came from? Silent 70. From Hebrews, the book of Hebrews. If you read, how many of you ever read the book of Hebrews completely through? Okay, you know then it comes. What?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
That's all right. Anyway, I'm going to regress just for a minute. How many of you know where the song "Let There Be Peace on Earth" came from? At 917 Tracy, we had a great big bulletin board. I mean, it was a regular bulletin board. And it was, "Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me." And the Jacksons wrote the song from that. And it is sung on almost all of the cruise ships at the end of their theater. And in fact, a couple of 3 weeks ago, I watched the Lawrence Welk show, and they sang that as their last song. So now when you sing it, you'll know where it really came from. It came from a big bulletin board that said, "Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me." Now that was Charles Fillmore. That was Papa Charlie. And anyway, then I worked with Nina. Anyway, she knew the priests and knew everybody all over the country, and she was an honorary warden because the wardens loved getting all of the cards that they sent out. And I was gone for about a year there between my 42 and 54, but I went back, of course. And I've been so grateful that I could grow up in this, as some people called it, a cult. But it wasn't. It was a practical Christianity that they felt needed in the world. And you can go on the internet and find out all the history of the school that you want. However, they've left out the practical, which is a shame, because it is a practical religion. And do we have any questions?
So if you had a question, I could ask you just to do it on the microphone. I know you don't want to.
Now, let me tell you, if I can answer the question, I will. If I can't, but don't ask me what year they did this or what year they did that or what they did then or whatnot.
So you mentioned the inn. What is the inn?
What?
You mentioned the inn next to 917 Tracy. Tell everybody what the inn is.
Oh, okay. Well, they moved to the Unity Farm. Oh, let me tell you, when I was in school, I walked about a mile to school, and we would walk through the woods and go through and watch the man who ground all of the material for the new administration buildings. See, Unity Farm was 1,500 acres. They had a lake, they had a dairy, they had greenhouses, we had a golf course, we had a swimming pool, we had a country club, we had a clubhouse, we had apartments. And you can see how I grew up in a country club also. I mean, it was a marvelous life. And anyway, in 1948, then they moved to Unity Farm. And then they named it Unity Village, and it now has its own post office. At that time, it didn't. It was a Lee Summit, Missouri question. Now, I grew up with Rosemary and Charles Fillmore. They were the grandchildren of Papa Charlie. Rosemary was the same age as I. She was born October the 14th or something like that of the same year. And Charles was about 5 years older. He was the age of my oldest brother. Now, during the war years, my mother worked at Unity School in the mail department. Both of my brothers had worked at the Unity School. And so you can see where I was so entrenched in the Unity movement that I've always followed it, even though I don't agree with some of the things that are taught in the churches. I've always said that Unity School should contribute to the churches so they have a string attached, and then they can be very careful about what they teach. Because some people will go way out on a limb. We had one teacher that I went to, and she said that Charles Fillmore said that animals were the creation of our thoughts, which is stupid. I mean, my God, who ever thought of that? So at that time, I said, this is where the school has to take some charge, so they just don't go out there and teach all of these goofy things. Because we're not a goofy church, we're a practical church. We teach practical Christianity. We teach, how many of you ever lived on a farm?
A farm?
A farm, I don't care. A farm.
A farm?
Yeah.
I know about a farm.
Okay. What do the farmers do from their crops? They save 10%
Yes.
for the next year. And that's part of tithing, is our 10%. And if you think that doesn't work, I don't know what to tell you. I just don't know what to tell you. Talk to Brian. And how many of you know how Brian and I know each other? Well, Brian came, I was working on a Friday, I volunteer on Friday, and I was here on a Friday, and I had not come to church for some time, and so I decided I'd come back and see if I could meet some rich guy. Well, let me tell you something. When I married John, I met him in church. So anyway, I came back and they said, well, we have a new minister. And I said, oh, really? So then he was here on a Friday and I was working on a Friday. And I'd heard that he had come from Washington, the state of Washington. So I said to him, what part of Washington do you come from? And he said, Federal Way. My jaw fell because my sister, my brother-in-law and sister-in-law lived in Federal Way. And I said, do you know the Waymillers? He said, I played football with Peter and Paul. Now, isn't this a small world? It is a small world. So anyway, he's like my kid. He's like my son, you know. And I wanted to tell you something. When he gets off base, I let him know it. Don't I, Brian? Don't I? And I let him know it. If I think he's overstepped or understepped, whatever. Anyway, So let's get back to questions.
I have
What was the end? You
Okay.
got to the end.
So anyway, I moved, then when they moved to the farm, they gave up 917 Tracy, and they moved to Unity Village, which is now Unity Village, but at the time it was Unity Farm. And we had a beautiful administration building, and we had a big chapel. We still had the greenhouses and the lake and the dairy and all of that stuff. But anyway, so in 1954, I had a chance to come to California. And let me tell you, I had a job that had been offered to me. And when I got here, I didn't have the job. The people were getting a divorce.
Oh,
So here I was, without, but the thing is that I got a better job. I went to work for the gas and electric company, and I worked there until I married my husband, John. Anyway, that's the end. Oh, but he and I met the first Sunday in church, and I was really coming out here. I was going to marry somebody else, but they didn't believe in my religion, and I knew that that wasn't correct. And John was, he just soaked it in, became very, very faithful. He passed away in '89. And anyway, he was a marvelous, marvelous person.
we were asking what was the end.
The inn, the INN, INN, did they build a motel? They built a...
Oh, the inn.
Yeah, not the end. The
Oh, that was the restaurant. And they served no meat. There was no meat. Papa Charlie didn't believe in that. So the inn, I ate lunch there every day until we moved.
Today, the inn is still there, it's on the village.
But it's in the village.
It's in the village, and they serve vegetarian every single day, but then they also serve a meat dish for us carnivores.
And Charles Fillmore, if he didn't believe in reincarnation, would turn over in his grave.
Yeah.
Because he was a very firm believer. Pardon me. Are we having a problem?
He did or did not believe in incarnation?
He does.
He did. And I don't want to shock all of you, but I happen to believe in it also. From the very first word I ever when I first heard it, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, I believed in it. I said, that's what I believe. Now, if you don't believe in it, that's okay too. May Rowland used to say that our religion was like a cafeteria. You came and took what you wanted and left behind, because if you tried to digest it all at once, you'd have a problem. So we still believe that you do not have to take every word we say as dogma. You have to take what you want, and for God's sake, leave behind what you don't want. And don't try to ponder it. Don't try to figure it out. Just accept it. And just say, okay, I don't believe that. And if you don't believe it, that's okay. You don't have to believe it. There may be a day that you will believe it. Because if we see these people, how many of you have seen the little 11-year-old girl on a public TV sing?
A what?
11 years old, most gorgeous voice. My John did not read music, but he played every instrument.
Wow.
He would come home and he'd hear a song on the radio, and he'd come down and sit in. He'd come in the house and sit down at the organ and play it. Now, you have to know that knowledge from somewhere. I was a corporate accountant and never had an ounce of bookkeeping, but I knew how to do it. So we have that knowledge from somewhere. Anyway, if you want to believe it, that's fine, and if you don't, that's fine.
Microphone. May I ask a question, please?
Yes.
I'd like to take you back to your Sunday school classroom. Children have always been a big part in my life. can you remember whether or not you were taught only biblical things, or were you taught with those biblical things to put in place in each child's life? As we say, we are a practical Christianity, which means that we can take the things in the Bible and place them in our hearts in practicality.
Well, see, we interpret the Bible. And I can remember when May Rowland explained this. If I wrote you a letter today, well, let's talk about Jonah and the whale's mouth. Now, don't go out and quote me and saying goofy things. But it's like saying, I wrote you a letter today, and I said I'm in a pickle of a fix. Okay, what's a pickle? What's a fix? How many of you know what a fix is? I mean, it was a dope thing. So it's how we interpret the Bible. And we do a lot of interpretations. And George Lamsa, who has done the Bible in Arabic, and he spoke Arabic. He spoke the language of Jesus. And anyway, I have one of his books, and he signed it, and I told Brian I'd give it to him someday. Anyway, so we interpret we don't take it literally. We take some things literally, and some things we interpret. But as I remember May explained about I'm in a pickle of a fix, today, what would we say? You're not in a pickle, you're not in a fix. And so I think I have taught every age of Sunday school class there is, even adult. I have taught biorhythms, believe me. And we must have participation for the children. Now, I did Bible verses, and I'll kind of give you an idea when I taught the children, the small children, and the 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds, as Sally knows. I did what we call a flannel board. And I would do the sentence but leave out a word or two. And then those words would be for the children to come up and put in that place. That's a participation. We must have participation in our churches. We must participate. We must be able to sing our songs, as you all know how I feel about that. We must, when we sing the old songs, how many of you know a lot of the old songs?
I couldn't hear you. Some of the old songs.
Some of the old songs.
I love the old songs.
We love the old songs, but we never sing them. And that's part of being practical. And so I am forever trying to get Brian to say, okay, we're going to open this with page 43, which is, we come to thee in silent prayer. And this is what we do. We come to church to be in silent prayer. And our children, I had a youth group, and I had them from anywhere from 30 to 50 kids, mostly boys. And when we would go to rallies, they would love to see us come, because we'd bring all the boys. But we did a lot of things with these kids. We took them sailing. We put them on, they went down Presidio on ice, and go down the banks, and did a lot of things. And this is what we must do for our children. If we want, one of these days we're all going to be real old. We're going to die.
Yeah, we are.
God, I'm 90. I'm not going to be around here forever, I hope. Maybe. But I want to tell you, I passed my driver's test. Without a problem.
Inez, can you tell us about when you had your children?
Oh, okay. I'm going to ask how many of you, I'm going to let you raise your hand. How many of you believe in the power of the spoken word?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to tell you something. When I was, how many of you ever heard of Martha Smock? She was the editor of Daily Word, Daily Word. And fortunately, she handed down her clothes to me to wear when I had my son. So wasn't I fortunate? But I used to go to the doctor, and I'd say, how do I know, when to go to the hospital if I'm going to have a painless childbirth? And he'd say to me, well, you'll know. And that was every time I went. And I really believed I was going to have a painless childbirth. So then that's the power of the spoken word. So on a Friday night, I was in the backyard with some neighbors, and this woman said, you're in contractions. And I said, what? And she said, you're in contractions. So I called the doctor, and he said, I'll see you about midnight. But to make a long story short, I didn't go into the hospital till Saturday. And I had gone to school with a kid, and his wife happened to be my nurse. And he came in to see me, and he said, Billy came in to see me, and he said, Dr. Singleton just came in and said he had a woman that was going to have a painless childbirth. And I had a 9-pound boy with no pain. Wow. So Ellie Meyer was our minister, and we were talking about it, and he said it was the power of the spoken word. We have to be so careful about our words, because there are prophecies. They tell us what's good. See, the subconscious mind doesn't know between a joke or seriousness, and the subconscious mind just accepts everything that we feed into it. So we have to be very, very careful about what we say, because the subconscious mind says, oh, okay, I'll take that. I believe that. So then, anyway, I had this youngster. So when I came to California, I was expecting again. And my Dr. Singleton wrote a letter to my doctor and said, work with her. Work with her. She'll have a painless childbirth. And I did. 2 children. Now, don't ask me what pain is. The thing is that we scare women by our TV. We put this stuff on television. It's like they tell you to take this medicine, but the side effects are worse than the disease.
That's right.
I mean, really. So we have to be so careful about what we say to ourselves. Yeah, Brian?
How often do you see a doctor?
When was the last?
25 years. Now, but I do have to tell you this. In February, I think it was, I passed out. And I had guests for dinner, and so they called 911 and took me to the hospital. But I have to tell you, this is funny. And it was my potassium was low, so that's why I passed out. But the doctor didn't tell me what to do or anything. You know what she said to me? Are those your teeth?
No, there's somebody else's.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they're my teeth. I paid for them. No, they are my teeth. But anyway, can you imagine? She's sitting there, and she's not telling me what to do. Anyway, she wanted to know if they were my teeth. And I kind of had to laugh. And anyway, they said they did whether you had seizures, and they did all these tests and everything. And then they sent the therapist in. And finally she said to me, "My God, you walk faster than I do." So it's the power of the spoken word. So if you don't take anything else from here, always remember what your words are. I had someone ask me one evening what I would tell the world if I could give them, and I said to her at the time, "Have good health." But that's really not it. It's the power of the word.
Yes.
The power of the word. And every time we say something negative, the subconscious accepts it because it can't discern whether it's positive or negative. Okay.
Do you think if we do catch ourselves saying something negative, does grace enter in if we don't, if we want to cancel that? We used to say cancel at school, and one of my teachers says, if I hear anybody else say cancel, I'm canceling this class.
Press, and I don't blame you.
But we can retract it. We can't say, I didn't mean it, God, we can we change that?
I think if we say a negative word, wait a minute, I'm not a minister.
Yes, you are.
I think that through the grace of God, our negative words can be forgiven. God forgives us of everything.
That's right.
There's really only one God, God the good, omnipotent. But if you catch yourself saying negative things, then correct it. See, we don't have to just keep going. I mean, we're not robots. We have been given the free will. So we have the will either to be positive, or we have the will to be negative. But if we are positive, I think if we do say something negative, June, that the grace of God forgives us. How many of you have children?
What?
Okay. How many of you have children? Okay. You love your children, don't you? And we're a child of God. God loves us no matter what we do.
I know God forgives us. I'm wondering if retracting it and asking for forgiveness to the universe, to yourself, does that make things different? If we remove the cause, do we still have the effect?
Well, there is always a cause and effect. And the cause is if the word is negative, and the effect is that we create that negative.
Right.
I have a friend who goes to the doctor 2 to 3 times a week.
Wow.
And believe it or not, it's difficult. I try to talk to her every day, but it's difficult because I don't want to hear. Her social life is going to the doctor,
Yeah.
which is beyond me. In fact, I'm on scan, which is an HMO. I have to tell you this because I'm on scan, and they changed doctors, and they called and asked me to come in for a physical. And I said, well, I'm sorry, I can't make it. She said, then we'll have to drop you from the rolls. This is the new doctor. And I don't really care. I don't really care. But we have to be so careful about what, except for the one time going to the hospital. I hadn't been to the doctor since, well, it's been 25 years. I go to the eye doctor and I go to the dentist. And those are the two that I go to.
You go and have your new physical and have them be surprised that they see somebody in that kind of health. It just should shock them. They should say, what are you doing right?
Well, but they don't want to know what you're doing right. They have a practice. Doctors have a practice. And what do? They practice. That's what they do. If this doesn't work, then they give you something else. If that doesn't work, then they'll give you something else. Well, who wants to go and have all of this stuff in your system that the body says, I don't know what to do with it? When you take prescription medicines, the body says, I don't know what to do with it. So you have side effects. Agree? Anyway, I'm not up here to preach a sermon. I'm up here to answer some questions.
I have a concern also.
What is it?
I didn't understand clearly about Hebrews.
I'm sorry, I can't.
The book of Hebrews.
Oh, about the book of Hebrews?
72? 70. Book club of whatever.
Silent 70.
70.
It's what?
The
Silent 70. What did
Oh.
that mean?
Oh, Silent 70 was, Jesus did send 70 out to help the prisoners, homeless, whatever at that time. So actually the Hebrew, what I would do is for you to encourage you to go home and read the book of Hebrews. You know, we used to have a saying at Unity School, and I told this to Brian, we never got in Revelations, and the fundamentalists never got out of them. Anyway, even when I go through a green light, I thank the Father.
Yeah.
I thank the Father for everything. I thank the Father for all of you. You know, I thought if I had 4 or 5 people show up, it'd be something. And as Paula knows, I'm a quilter. As Robert knows, I'm a quilter. I pieced a quilt at the age of 10 and quilted it when I was 79.
Wow.
And I still have it. And so I have been really so grateful for my opportunity to have grown up under this religion. In fact, Sally has a friend that was in my Sunday school class. Greg.
You said you were very kind to him.
He was a sweet boy. He really was, but he came from a mixed religious family. His mother came to our church, and his father was Jewish, and he didn't ever quite grasp it. And the 9-year-old, 4th graders have the toughest time of anybody in school. Now, how many of you know why they have the toughest time? Because they're not little kids, and they're not big kids. They're like that middle child. And I loved my kids when they were when I had the 4th graders, because I felt that they really needed extra care. They needed to know that they were children of God, that God loved them no matter what. You know, we do teach one thing: heaven and hell is here on earth.
Yeah, that's true.
And I used to say to my teenagers, how many times have you ever come home late with a car? You lived through hell, didn't you? And they agreed. And that's true. We create our own heaven and hell. We have that choice. We have that will, that choice to either create it or not to, always to create our heaven and hell. Somebody had a question back here, a gentleman, or Paul is going to.
I just wanted to say this is one of the smartest things that this church has ever done, because I've always felt if I can grasp I'm 63.
Good.
You know, and I want to hang around a while. And if I can grasp some of the knowledge from you guys that have lived the next few years and, you know, where I need to change and what I can do better. And I mean, we can never hear this better than from your perspective, vice perspective, you know, really. So I think this was, whoever came up with the idea, I want to applaud
Robert.
Mister.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of us that and you can see, we're here because we respect you and because we think you have a lot to teach us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
Thank
we
you.
want to learn it.
Yes.
Well, you already have. And always remember that we're a child of God. God created us, and we're a child of God, and God loves us. Always remember that. Okay.
So back to the inn.
Okay.
Did the residents live in the inn, or was it like a hotel?
No. It was 1,500 acres, and we had an apartment house.
The inn was the entire thing.
No, just the inn is just the restaurant.
But there is a motel there.
Yeah, they have this place now.
Yeah, that's so cool.
You asked
About the inn.
About the inn.
about the inn.
What is the inn?
Yeah, you said that
Well, there's a restaurant.
headquarters, that was the inn.
We called it Unity Inn, and it was the restaurant.
Okay, I was,
And it was cafeteria style, just like our religion is. It's cafeteria style. Take what you want, and for God's sake, leave behind and don't try to ponder it. Don't try to figure it out, because someday it'll come to you.
May I speak to that just a minute?
Yeah.
The inn has the most wonderful food you have ever had the opportunity to eat. But what about my cooking?
Yeah, what about your cooking?
For me, the inn is something entirely different. You sit in this building that, number one, has an energy of love that you have never felt.
Right.
And in that building, sitting at round tables, are people from all over this world speaking a different language, but still feeling that energy of love between each heart. I was blown away my first visit to Unity Village. I've been back there several times since, and I've always felt the same. It is a place of unity among all people.
Oh, that's right. That's right. And do you know that the congregation in New York City by Eric Butterworth, Eric and Catherine Butterworth were in New York, and the largest share of his congregation was Jewish. Was Jewish. This is the thing, is that what we teach is so universal that all religions can accept it. My former husband, who passed away a couple of 3 years ago, he was Jewish. And he had been raised as an Orthodox Jew. And he loved coming to this church. He loved Arthur. He loved it because, and I'd say to him, well, shall we go to temple today? And he'd say, no, this would be on a Saturday. And he'd say, no. I have friends in England who are Orthodox Jewish. And every Christmas, Fred would call and say, I want to wish you a happy birthday for a very famous rabbi. Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, see, he accepted me being a Christian. And I would stay with them for a month at a time. And I learned a lot about the Jewish faith. And they're supposed to be God's chosen children, but we're all God's chosen children. Anyway, we're going to...
Okay, one last question. Here we go.
Kathy.
I heard that Charles Fillmore didn't offer health insurance to the employees at the village because he believed that we believe in self-manifestation of health. Is this where you picked up yours about, avoiding the practice of medicine, or did you have health benefits when you were working at the village?
Oh, no, we didn't have health benefits. We didn't even have Social Security. No. Well, because we were a religious organization. I think that Papa Charlie believed in doctors to the extent that they were God-given ideas. But see, what has happened over the years, and I'm going to say this carefully. I don't want anybody, I don't want everybody to throw eggs at me. We have become a nation that is controlled by our prescription drugs. If we cut out all the prescription drugs, we'd fall flat on our faces. They are a big, big, big part of our economy. Let's face it. But Charles Fillmore didn't say you can't go to a doctor. He didn't believe that. He believed that we had free choice. And if that's what we wanted to do, go to the doctor. If you didn't want to believe that, don't go to the doctor. And I can honestly say that as a child, we didn't run to the doctor. We had home remedies. I still have a good home remedy. And so, but you have to remember that Papa Charlie taught that God gave us free choice. And that doctors were put on earth for a reason. You ask me why, I don't know.
One of the first things I heard when I got into Unity was, if you have a health problem, or you think you have a health problem, go first to God, then to man. And
He will direct you.
That makes a lot of sense.
He will direct you to the correct doctor. But you have to go to God first. See, we have to say in our life, God, our Father, we are His child, and He will take care of us if we let Him take care of us. But see, what happens is, we ask God for something. Am I in a sermon?
We'll give him 3 minutes.
Okay. We ask God for something, and then we grab it back and say, you don't know what you're doing. I'll work it out. See, and that, I think everything I learned, Kathy, was if I give it to God, for God's sake, let it go. And let God work it out. Don't try to, it's like dying and then throwing a check in the casket. And then you grab it out again. See, we have a tendency to want to be controlling. And if we just let God control, then we put everything in His hands. When I would send my children off to school, I would say, I place you lovingly in the hands of the Father, and all is well. If you don't remember anything else, remember that. I place you lovingly in the hands of the Father, and all is well.
Amen.
When I was having eye surgery, I was blessing that doctor all the time. I was placing him in the light.
Lovingly in the hands of the Father.
Helped it to be very successful.
Oh, that's right. See, there's just a couple of those things, but remember that. And if you have children, if I think of one of my children, and I try not to have negative thoughts, but if I let one seep in, I say, I place you lovingly in the hands of the Father, and all is well.
Okay.
And all is well. Okay.
than silver. Lord, you are more costly than gold. Lord, you are more beautiful than diamonds, and nothing I desire compares with you. Lord, you are more precious than silver. Lord, you are more costly than gold. Lord, you are more beautiful than diamonds, and nothing I desire compares with you. And nothing I desire compares with you.